Please be seated, my friends. Thanks. When you get to be of a certain age, and you may have grandchildren, or students that you've taught in school have become ordained priests, and you have your grandchildren over to your house, and they start to look around and look at the photographs on your wall and on your bureau, and your grandchildren say to you, looking at your photo when you were in your 20s, "Grandma, is that you?" Incredulous. Or grandfather, you hear your grandkids saying when they think that you're out of earshot, "Wow, Grandpa used to be handsome." Used to be. It's even harder to recognize ourselves in our youthful photos when we've had a major surgery or chemotherapy or a radiation treatment. I had a photograph of myself as a very young priest when I was 32 years old, meeting Pope John Paul II in 1986. I used to have that in my office, but so many of my students would come in and say, "Who is that young boy meeting the Pope?" It's easy to think that these were the best years of our lives, as that hit song goes. Those were the best years of our lives. But I agree more with Count Basie and Frank Sinatra, who sang, "The best is yet to come." And that agrees with our Catholic theology and the teaching of Jesus Christ. So it was with Jesus when he experienced his passion, and so it is with us. Most images in Christian art show Jesus as a handsome young man, radiant, with loving eyes, manly, the pinnacle of human perfection. But Isaiah prophesied that the Messiah would not be handsome. As we heard in the first reading from the prophet Isaiah, Isaiah said, "He had no majestic bearing to catch our eye, no beauty to draw us to him, like one from whom you turn your face, spurned, and we held him in no esteem." But when Christ went to his passion and death, Christian art changed and showed him distressed, anxious, suffering, hurting, despondent, and in pain. Does that sound like you? They say they have the shroud that wrapped Christ after he died. They call it the Shroud of Turin. They've done carbon dating on it, saying it dates from the time of Jesus. That's not what convinces me of its authenticity. When they examined the cloth and they made a photograph of the face of Christ, it showed him suffering and painful, and he looks like any other elderly, suffering man, just like us. And so it was with Jesus, and so it is with us. 3 things to remember today. By suffering, we become more like Jesus. When we were baptized, the priest said, "Through baptism, you're baptized into his death, so as to rise with Jesus in his resurrection." We become more like him. Second, by suffering, we participate in the saving action of Jesus. Isaiah said, "By his wounds, we are healed." We participate in that by being baptized Christians, when we go through suffering, we're assisting Jesus in his saving mission. St. Paul says, "I feel out of my body what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ." We're helping that salvation move forward. A teenager told me he came back to church after walking away from God. I said, "What made you come back?" He said, My grandmother had cancer, and she suffered. But I saw how her Catholic faith gave her hope and peace. I saw what that faith meant to her. And I know she offered her sufferings for me, that I'd come back to church. And so he did, after she was dead and buried. The French philosopher Simone Weil said, "No amount of human achievement can ever change the world, but only the passion of Jesus Christ. I want to be part of it." Science doesn't save the world. Love will save the world. And by joining yourself with Jesus' loving sacrifice on the cross, you're helping him save the world. And the third point, as bad as suffering may be in this life, remember, it's only temporary. Good Friday lasted one day. The resurrection is for eternity. And that resurrection begins to break in even in this life. There is a saint, Kateri Tekakwitha. They call her the Lily of the Mohawks. She's a canonized Native American Indian saint. When she was a girl, she got smallpox, which was going through the tribe. Her mother and father both died of smallpox. Her little brother died of smallpox. She got it, but she survived. But it left an effect on her body. For her whole life, her face was pockmarked with the remnants of the smallpox. It so disfigured her appearance that when she went through the Indian village doing her chores, she covered up her face because people made fun of her being ugly. When the Blackrobes, the Jesuit missionaries, arrived in her village and began to preach the gospel, the priests explained how Jesus' suffering and resurrection had forever changed the cross, a symbol of death, into a reminder of eternal life. That struck a deep chord in Kateri. She requested instruction, was baptized on Easter Sunday in 1676, and she said it was the happiest day of her life. Years later, she contracted tuberculosis, which brought her to her deathbed. She was surrounded by Catholic Indians, and a Jesuit priest gave her the last rites. When she died, no one left the room. Within minutes of breathing her last breath, all the pockmarks on her face disappeared, and her face was as radiant as a baby's face when it is born. Everyone present recognized that as a miracle. That miracle is meant to remind us that our suffering is temporary, our happiness eternal. Trust in the cross of Jesus, the great healer. Trust in your place in his saving mission of mercy and salvation. And I know it gets hard. When it's tough, call on Mother Mary. She never abandoned Jesus. She will never abandon you.